Tom lived a quiet life in a small town where everyone knew each other. His house stood at the edge of the road, old but strong, with a wide backyard that had seen many seasons. The backyard was nothing special to most people. It had dry grass, a few trees, and soil that had never been touched deeply. Tom had spent years there, drinking tea in the mornings and sitting alone in the evenings, thinking about life. One summer morning, Tom hired a construction team to fix an old water pipe. The pipe had been leaking for months, and the ground stayed wet no matter how hot the sun was. Tom wanted the work done quickly so he could return to his peaceful routine. The workers arrived early, carrying tools and machines. They greeted Tom politely and began marking the ground. Ben was the leader of the team. He had worked in construction for many years and had seen many strange things under the ground. Still, he believed that every job was simple until proven otherwise. He told his team to start digging near the old tree at the back of the yard. The machines roared as soil was lifted and moved aside. At first, everything went as expected. Dirt, stones, and roots came out of the ground. Tom stood nearby, watching quietly. He did not know why, but he felt a strange feeling in his chest. It was not fear, but not comfort either. He brushed it off, thinking it was just worry about the cost of repairs. Suddenly, the machine made a sharp metal sound. The worker stopped at once. Ben raised his hand, signaling everyone to pause. The sound was not normal. It was heavy and solid, not like a rock. The team switched off the machines and moved closer to the hole. One of the workers used a shovel and gently cleared more soil. Slowly, a dark metal surface appeared. It was flat, thick, and covered in rust. The shape was clear. It was a large metal safe, buried deep under the ground. Everyone stood still. No one spoke for a moment. Tom stepped closer, his heart beating faster. He had lived in this house for decades, but he had never known something like this was hidden beneath his feet. Ben looked at Tom and asked if he knew anything about it. Tom shook his head slowly. He said the land had belonged to his family for a long time, but no one had ever mentioned a buried safe. The workers exchanged glances. Their curiosity grew. They carefully dug around the safe, making sure not to damage it. The soil around it was hard, as if it had been untouched for many years. As more of the safe came into view, it became clear that it was very old. The metal was thick, and the lock looked different from modern designs. Tom felt a wave of memories wash over him. He thought of his childhood, of stories his grandmother used to tell him about the past. She often spoke of hard times, of secrets kept to protect loved ones. She never explained everything, and Tom never asked. Now those half-stories returned to his mind. One worker noticed markings on the safe. They were faint but visible. Ben wiped the surface with a cloth, revealing numbers and symbols carved into the metal. Among them was a year. The year made Tom freeze. It was the same year his grandfather had disappeared. Tom's grandfather was a quiet man who had lived in the house before him. One day, many years ago, he left and never returned. There were no answers, only guesses. Some believed he had moved away. Others believed something sad had happened. The family never spoke of it openly. The silence became part of their lives. Seeing that year carved into the safe made Tom feel dizzy. He held onto the fence to steady himself. Ben noticed and asked if he was all right. Tom nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the safe. He felt like the ground beneath him was opening not just physically, but emotionally. The workers suggested calling officials, but Ben decided to wait until they understood more. The safe was on Tom's property, and it seemed connected to his family history. They agreed to stop digging for the day and cover the safe lightly. Tom thanked them, his voice low. That night, Tom could not sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at old family photos spread out before him. He looked at his grandfather's face, trying to understand what kind of man he truly was. Had he buried the safe? If so, why had he hidden it so carefully? Outside, the backyard lay silent under the moonlight. Beneath the soil, the ancient safe waited, holding secrets that time had protected for years. Tom felt that whatever was inside would change everything. He did not yet know how, but he knew his quiet life was about to shift forever. The next morning, Tom woke up before sunrise. His mind was heavy with thoughts of the safe buried in his backyard. The image of rusted metal and carved numbers stayed with him through the night. He made a cup of tea, but the warmth did not calm him. Something from the past had surfaced, and it refused to stay quiet. When the construction team arrived again, Tom was already waiting outside. Ben noticed the tired look on his face. He asked if Tom had slept well. Tom gave a small smile and said he was fine, though his eyes told another story. The workers began clearing the soil again, this time with extra care. As the safe was uncovered fully, everyone could see how large it was. It was heavier than expected, built to protect something important. The corners were thick, and the lock was strong despite the rust. Ben guessed it had been buried for many decades. This was not something placed in a hurry. Neighbors started to gather near the fence. Word had spread quickly in the small town. People whispered, pointing at the hole in the ground. Some were excited, some curious, and some uneasy. Tom felt uncomfortable with the attention, but he understood why people were drawn to the mystery. One neighbor, an old woman named May, stood quietly at the edge. She had known Tom's family for years. She looked at the safe and then at Tom. Her face turned pale. She said softly that she remembered Tom's grandfather digging in the yard late at night long ago. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He asked her why she never mentioned it before. May said she thought it was better to forget those days. Hearing this made Tom feel both grateful and confused. If others had seen his grandfather working in secret, then the safe was no accident. It was planned. Tom wondered what kind of worry or hope could lead a man to hide something so carefully. Ben suggested moving the safe out of the ground so it could be examined better. The team used straps and a small lift. The metal creaked as it was raised, but it held together. When the safe finally rested on the surface, a strange silence fell over the yard. Tom walked closer and placed his hand on the cold metal. He felt a deep connection, as if he were touching the past itself. He whispered his grandfather's name without realizing it. The name had not been spoken aloud in years. Ben asked Tom what he wanted to do next. Tom took a moment before answering. He said he wanted to open it, but not yet. He felt it deserved respect. Whatever was inside had waited a long time. Rushing now felt wrong. The workers agreed to pause. They covered the safe with a tarp and promised to return later. The neighbors slowly went back to their homes, still talking among themselves. Tom was left alone again with the safe and his thoughts. That afternoon, Tom visited the town library. He searched through old records and newspapers. He found articles from the year carved into the safe. There were stories of difficult times, of families struggling, and of sudden disappearances. One small article mentioned his grandfather's name. It said he had been a trusted man who helped others quietly. Tom felt tears rise in his eyes. His grandfather was not just a mystery. He was part of the town's history. Tom realized how little he truly knew about the man who came before him. When Tom returned home, the sun was setting. The backyard looked different now. The grass seemed thinner, the soil disturbed. The safe stood there like a silent guard. Tom sat on a chair nearby and spoke out loud, as if his grandfather could hear him. He said he was ready to listen. As night fell, a gentle wind moved through the trees. Tom felt a strange sense of calm. The fear he had felt earlier was fading, replaced by curiosity and respect. He understood that the safe was not just metal. It was a message waiting to be read. Inside the house, Tom found an old wooden box in the attic. It held letters and small items that belonged to his grandparents. Among them was a key, old and worn. Tom held it carefully. He did not know if it belonged to the safe, but his heart told him it might. He placed the key on the table and sat quietly, staring at it for a long time. The past was slowly opening its door. Tom knew that when the safe was finally opened, answers would come. Some might bring pain, and some might bring peace. For now, the safe remained closed. But its silence was growing louder, and Tom was no longer afraid to listen. Morning light filled Tom's house, but he had already been awake for hours. The old key rested on the table beside him. He had turned it in his hands many times during the night. The weight of it felt important, as if it carried the voice of someone long gone. Tom washed his face, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The backyard looked quiet, but the safe stood there like a silent guest. The construction team arrived shortly after. Ben greeted Tom and noticed the key in his hand. He did not ask questions. He simply nodded, understanding that this day was different from any other workday. The workers cleared the area and removed the cover from the safe. Sunlight hit the rusted metal, showing every mark and line carved into its surface. The date stood out clearly. Everyone gathered around, forming a small circle. No one spoke loudly. Even the usual sounds of the street seemed to fade. Tom stepped forward. His hands trembled as he knelt beside the safe. He wiped the lock gently, clearing years of dirt. The lock looked old but strong. Tom held the key up and studied it once more. It fit his palm perfectly, as if it had been waiting for him. Ben asked if Tom wanted help. Tom shook his head. He said this was something he needed to do himself. The workers stepped back, giving him space. A few neighbors stood behind the fence, watching silently. Tom slowly placed the key into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. His heart beat fast. Then he turned the key. A soft click echoed through the yard. Several people gasped. The sound was small, but it felt powerful. Tom paused. He closed his eyes and thought of his grandfather. He imagined the man standing in the same yard many years ago, making a choice that would last through time. Tom turned the key again. This time, the lock released fully. Ben carefully helped lift the heavy door. It opened with effort, making a deep metal sound. When the door finally moved aside, everyone leaned closer. The inside of the safe was dark, but dry and clean, protected from the world outside. Tom looked inside and froze. Neatly stacked bundles of letters filled one side of the safe. They were tied with simple string, yellowed by age but well kept. On the other side rested a small wooden box and a folded cloth. Tom reached in and picked up the letters. His hands shook as he read the first name written on top. It was his grandmother's name. His breath caught in his chest. These were letters meant for her, never sent or perhaps never opened. He opened one carefully. The writing was steady and clear. The words spoke of love, hope, and responsibility. His grandfather wrote about difficult times and hard choices. He wrote about wanting to protect his family, even if it meant being misunderstood. Tears filled Tom's eyes. The workers and neighbors stood quietly. No one rushed him. They could feel that this moment was deeply personal. Ben placed a hand on Tom's shoulder, offering silent support. Tom then lifted the folded cloth. Inside it was an old photograph. It showed his grandfather standing in the backyard, smiling slightly. Beside him was the safe, newly placed into the ground. The photo was proof. Everything was real. The wooden box was next. Tom opened it slowly. Inside were carefully placed savings, along with a small note. The note explained that the contents were meant for future generations, to be used only when truly needed. It was not about wealth. It was about care and planning. Tom felt his legs weaken. He sat down on the grass, holding the note close. The truth was clear now. His grandfather had not left without reason. He had stayed in his own way, guarding the family from afar. One of the workers wiped his eyes. Another looked down, moved by the honesty inside the safe. Even the neighbors felt the weight of the moment. This was not a treasure story. It was a story of love passed through time. Tom spoke softly, thanking his grandfather. His voice broke, but he did not stop. He said he understood now. He said the silence made sense. The safe was not meant to hide secrets forever. It was meant to wait. As the safe stood open under the sky, the past and present met in one place. Tom knew his life would never be the same. He felt sadness for the years of not knowing, but also peace for finally understanding. The workers closed the safe gently after Tom removed the contents. They helped move it to a safe spot. The construction work was forgotten for the day. Something more important had happened. As evening approached, Tom carried the letters inside. He placed them on the table with care. The house felt warmer, fuller. The safe had been opened, but its greatest gift was not what was inside. It was the truth it carried. The house felt different after the safe was opened. Tom noticed it the moment he stepped inside. The walls seemed closer, not in a heavy way, but in a warm and familiar way. He placed the letters carefully on the table and sat down. For many years, silence had lived in this house. Now, the silence was filled with meaning. Tom spent the morning reading the letters one by one. Each letter carried his grandfather's voice. The words were simple, but strong. They spoke about daily life, about worry for the family, and about hope for a better future. His grandfather wrote about wanting Tom and others to grow up without fear. He wrote about making choices that would never be understood until the right time. As Tom read, memories returned. He remembered his grandmother sitting by the window, often looking outside with quiet patience. She never spoke badly about her husband. She only said that he did what he believed was right. At the time, Tom had not understood. Now, every word made sense. Outside, the town slowly learned the truth. Neighbors talked, not with excitement, but with respect. They remembered Tom's grandfather as a kind man who helped others during hard times. Some shared stories Tom had never heard before. One neighbor said his grandfather once gave food to a family in need without asking for anything in return. Ben returned in the afternoon to check on Tom. He did not come as a worker, but as a person who had shared an important moment. Tom invited him inside. They sat at the table, and Tom showed him a few letters. Ben read them quietly, his face serious. He said not many people leave behind such clear words of love. The wooden box was still unopened since the day before. Tom finally decided to look at it again. He opened it slowly and counted the savings. It was not a large amount, but it was carefully planned. There was also a small paper with instructions. It said the savings were to be used for family needs or to help others, never for pride. Tom felt a deep responsibility. This was not just a gift. It was a trust. He realized that his grandfather had believed in the future and in the people who would come after him. That belief felt heavy, but also comforting. Later that day, Tom walked into the backyard. The hole had been filled, and the ground was flat again. The place where the safe once rested looked ordinary. But Tom knew what had been there. He stood quietly, placing his hand on the soil. He whispered words of thanks. As evening came, Tom visited the old woman May. He thanked her for speaking up. May smiled gently and said she had waited many years for this truth to come out. She said some things are hidden not to be forgotten, but to be revealed at the right time. That night, Tom sat alone again, but he did not feel lonely. He organized the letters and placed them in a box. He decided to keep them safe and share them with family members. He also made plans to use part of the savings to repair the house, just as his grandfather would have wanted. Tom realized that the past had shaped him more than he knew. The unanswered questions had made him cautious, quiet, and distant. Now that the answers were clear, he felt lighter. He understood where his strength came from. The town council contacted Tom, asking if he would share his grandfather's story for local history. Tom agreed. He believed the story was not just about his family. It was about quiet courage and careful love. As Tom prepared for bed, he looked at the old photograph once more. He smiled. The man in the picture no longer felt distant. He felt close, like a guide who had finally spoken. The truth had weight, but it also brought peace. Tom knew the final part of this journey was not about the safe or the letters. It was about how he would carry this legacy forward. The days after the truth came out moved slowly, but in a good way. Tom no longer felt rushed by time. Each morning, he woke up with a sense of purpose he had never known before. The house, once filled with quiet questions, now felt full of answers. The story of the safe had ended, but a new chapter of life had begun. Tom began by sharing the letters with his family. Relatives came from nearby towns, sitting together in the living room. He read the letters aloud, one by one. Some family members cried softly. Others smiled. Everyone listened closely. The words connected them, reminding them that they were part of something larger than themselves. The savings from the wooden box were used with care. Tom fixed the old water pipe and repaired the roof. He also helped a local family who was struggling. He did not tell anyone where the money came from. He remembered his grandfather's wish that kindness be quiet and sincere. The town invited Tom to speak at a small gathering. He stood in front of familiar faces and told the story simply. He spoke about love, responsibility, and patience. He did not speak about mystery or excitement. He spoke about trust. The people listened in silence. Many felt inspired by the idea that simple choices could shape the future. Tom placed the old safe in a corner of his garage. He cleaned it but did not remove its marks. The rust and scratches were part of its history. Sometimes he stood in front of it, placing his hand on the metal, feeling the connection between generations. One afternoon, a young boy from the neighborhood asked Tom about the safe. Tom smiled and told him it was not just a box. It was a promise. The boy listened carefully, his eyes wide with curiosity. Tom realized that stories like this were meant to be shared, not hidden. As seasons changed, the backyard grew green again. Grass covered the place where the safe had rested for so long. Tom planted a small tree there. He watered it often, watching it grow. To him, the tree symbolized everything his grandfather had believed in: growth, patience, and care. Tom also changed in small ways. He spoke more openly with people. He listened more carefully. He offered help when he could. The quiet strength he had inherited was now clear to him. He carried it with pride, but never with prideful words. One evening, Tom sat by the window, holding the photograph of his grandfather. The sunset painted the sky with soft colors. Tom felt calm. The past no longer felt heavy. It felt complete. He wrote a letter of his own and placed it with the others. In it, he spoke to future family members. He wrote about the importance of kindness, honesty, and patience. He wrote about listening to the quiet moments in life. Years later, people in the town would still speak of the day the safe was found. But they would speak more about what followed. They would speak about how one story brought people closer and reminded them of what truly mattered. Tom lived the rest of his life in that house. He grew older, but he never lost the feeling of connection. The safe, the letters, and the tree remained part of his daily life. They reminded him that love does not fade with time. In the end, the safe was not just opened. A heart was opened too. And that was the greatest gift of all.